Amanda, are you recording for us?
30 seconds. 10 seconds. Okay, we're good.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Welcome to planning. This is May 4th.
The audio.
Okay. This is May 4th, 2020 at 6:06 p.m. We'll start with planning and zoning roll call. Sarah Burak.
Amanda Podman.
Marcia Haydenfeld.
Adoption.
And Melissa Eggy is excused from tonight's meeting. We do have town council with us. Town council, do you guys want to do a roll call?
Luann Hook.
Jim Sayers.
Linda Sosa is here. Thanks, Linda. Okay, awesome. We'll move on with the next part of our agenda. So approval of meeting minutes from 4/20, April 20th. I'll share my screen so you guys can look at them.
You didn't send those, did you? So I forgot.
I didn't. My apologies. I did not send out a packet because Quinn has been sick and we were distracted. So my bad.
I think I had some comments on this, but I don't think I made them. So now I'm a little worried. Let's see.
You want me to scroll slowly?
A little bit.
Could you make them a little bigger?
Maybe.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right under the, no, right below your on the next row. Let go of the top row and just do it on right there.
Oh,
See,
thank
yeah.
you.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was right there. Processing. I guess I don't see it.
Let me scroll up.
Up just a little bit, please. I'm sorry. I just noticed something when I was reading them earlier. Sometimes timeline, signs have mass square footage. Town proceedings, spend time looking at signs. I guess it's fine. There's nothing that's wrong. It was just some interpretation, I think. So I'm good. I make a motion to approve the minutes from 4/20/22 as presented.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Amanda, did you vote?
I will abstain. There.
Thanks, Amanda. 3 votes to approve, minutes approved, motion passes. Thank you guys very much. Okay, on to our next item, which is public citizens to be heard. So if you would like to make a public comment, you have about 3 minutes. You can unmute your microphone or put your name in chat.
This is Jim Sayers, and I just want to say, as a citizen, thank you very much for your service. You guys are doing a great job. I think it's really a hard job, and it's a thankless job. But here's some thanks.
Thank you, Jim. We appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay, I'm closing public comment, and we'll move on to update from Town Council.
Okay, this is Luann Hook. So we had 2 work sessions since the last time you all had a meeting, and then we met last night. And the work sessions were mostly discussing the amendments to the ordinances that you had all recommended to us for consideration. And then last night, between, all right, well, my next thing was the dark skies. And there were those 3 events that were put on by the Dark Sky Committee. And that's part of the International Dark Sky Week. They did a meter study, you know, the sky glow study, a historical district walkthrough to look at lighting, and then a night of telescopes and star viewing. And that's all important in keeping the dark sky designation process going, and also keeping the ordinance in people's eyes and thinking about that. We did have a public citizen last night, Dudley Beck, and several others commented in support of a solar development on top of the bench or wherever solar would be wanting to be installed. And they discussed the one that's south of Montezuma Creek. I'm pretty sure you all know that that one is being put in, pretty large one south of Montezuma Creek, and it's being built right now. Dr. Grant Sunada joined us. He's the public health person. He came just mostly to come, he came in person to the community center. So a couple of us met in person, and then he was on our meeting, mostly as a support liaison with the health department. And then Dr. Barentine, we decided last night back to the dark skies that we would get his advice on the current lighting ordinance and get his input along with the committee and Dr. Barentine to figure out what his advice is on our ordinance and then move from there instead of all of us trying to figure it out. We're deferring to the expert. Cemetery board still has 1 more week of advertising. There's 3 positions. Ann did put in for one of them. They wanted one from the Bluff Town Council, thought that would be good. And the idea is to get it worked, get the system lined out, which she's very good at, and then pass it back to the town. So, and then we deferred the amendments to the zoning ordinance to the end of the meeting so that we didn't lose our audience in our discussions. But we discussed it quite a bit during those work sessions, so it was just a vote, yes or no, on each of the ones that we had discussed and couldn't come to a complete consensus on. So we went through each one item by item. And so the ones that I thought you would be the most interested in, I'm sure it will be in the minutes or out in some form other than this, but the ones I thought you might be interested, when the residential discussion, it remained a single family residential designation. Left the duplex definition to, we did not delete the single ownership part, which distinguishes it from condos. The kennel manager in town language was added, which is similar to the short-term rental wording that says somebody's available in town when it's being used. The archaeological resources was not deleted. The site plans are still required. Deleted the suggestion of adding kennels to A2, and nothing was done with the C3 because of the noticing and whatnot. Did take the recommendation to add it to F1. They kept the 50-foot setbacks instead of the 30 on commercial zones. And then we noted a few definitions that need to be added at some point, and that would be like Site 1, explaining what a Site 1 is for like the archaeological things, Site 2, and animal shelter. So those were the ones that I thought you would be most interested in. My recommendation is if we do more amendments, we should all sit down together because it's, I know you all did a lot of work on research and whatnot, and it's hard to convey all of that, and I think if we all discuss it in the future might be a good idea, but that's just my opinion. That was not voted on or anything along those lines, but anyway, we did a consensus on each one. My position, for example, I lost on lots of them, but on a couple of them I got what I had thought was better. We all voted unanimously to accept the amendments as we did a consensus and move forward on. So, and then that will be, you know, it's a living document. It may need to go through changes. again, but that's where it sits now. So questions or additions? Linda and Jim, you're both on, so if there's something I missed that you think they need to know or would like to know.
No, that sounded about right. Thank you, Luann. Complicated. And thank you again for passing that down to us. It gave us a lot of interesting conversations.
Yeah, we did discuss them all quite a bit, but
Thanks, Luann. Thanks, Jim.
all right.
Planning and zoning, did you guys have questions or thoughts for Luann? Marcia? No?
I can't. I'm too bummed.
There were some I you know, like I say, I sat through all of your discussions, and so I understand. That's why I'm presenting them. I explained it. That's why I say I think it would be good to all work together on if there are more amendments to anything else that's already passed.
Well, don't forget, we can't do anything else. We can only do what we did at the public hearing.
Right, exactly. But for the next, if you have another public hearing to do
Right.
more amendments, then that would be the time for a little bigger group, maybe. So it's or however it works. But anyway, I did pass that on. So
Right. And Luann, none of this is personal. It's like how I feel versus how you voted.
exactly. No.
Perfectly normal city stuff. So it's fine.
No, and like I say, we had split votes on a lot of these, but the general final consensus is that we were all happy enough. We all had compromises on every part of it all the way through, but we all at the end said, okay, these are the amendments that we can accept. So
Thank you, Luann. We appreciate you giving us an update. One thing I wanted to ask you, we did, on Thursday night during the Dark Sky event, we did light meter readings, and we just went to the same places that you had already gone to. Are you comfortable with me putting that into a spreadsheet?
oh, you bet. Yeah, I did that as, I don't even remember how it looked, but that was my version of where I went that night. And I think Jen gave the update last night and said that you guys went to all of those spots. And I think the designation and keeping that current, I think they only require like 4 or 5 sites. I did that more as like, okay, here are the spots I wanted to see where it was the darkest and stuff. So I don't want you to feel like you need to do all of those, but you'll know better. You guys will know better. But that's what it was a start, and I just put it in as my system to where you can take it on from there. So do whatever you like.
Okay, thanks, Luann. Yeah, I think it's a good start for sure. And as we go through the process, we might tailor them down a little bit, but it's a wide, a very broad view of Bluff, so it's actually really good. In the future, two teams with 2 meters. That's what I'm going to suggest.
Well, and or like, you know, I can do it another time. I'm happy to do it another time. But I think if you just pare it down to, you know, even half of those, because there's not any spot that really glows or anything. So I would suggest just knocking it down unless there's another meter we can get, or 2 nights. It doesn't have to be the exact night. It could just be, you know, 2 or 3 nights. Dark, no moon, and then like the day before and the day after would be the same thing.
No, that's good advice. Thank you, Luann. I'll make a spreadsheet and I'll share it with everybody so you guys can have an idea of what we're looking at. Awesome. On to new business, which land use clearances, I don't have any. I am working on, sorry, illness has set us back a little bit, but Joe Hubbard with the mission has submitted his final document, so we had conditional improvement of that, and I'll sign it in his land use clearance and go ahead and get that going for him. But that's the only kind of new update. We've gotten all of the things that we requested at this point, so I'll sign that and send it along. Anything else as far as land use clearances? Okay. On to forms, and Amanda, we we kind of kept this for you because we were like, Amanda has a much better idea of what we need. You could probably see in the minutes. We try to think of a few things we know we're missing, but if there's some things that you had that you wanted to add since you weren't here the last meeting.
I definitely agree with the variance form and the zoning code request form.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well there.
Sorry, also my internet keeps going in and out. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I agree with the variance form and the zoning code change request form. But I think any violation or complaint form should be more on the side of town council. And then I saw a question about formalizing or making them look, professional. And I have been trying to use the same heading on them, but I agree that we should look and make sure they're all kind of standardized. I don't have any other besides those.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure. Marshall?
Well, I had made a list of what I found and didn't find, and there's one, like the LUC, and we have it, the subdivision, and we have it. I just went through as much as I could, and I found one that needs Amanda's attention, and that is the land partition request. On the website, if you click land partition form, you end up with the subdivision form. And the land partition form does exist in our paper archives, our Google archives.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm just going to assign it to you because you know what to do, and I don't. And the variance request, did town council pass variance ordinance, is that correct? Or is it part of the changes we're just about to make?
They did a separate ordinance.
Okay, and it's already approved?
Yes.
Okay, so then we need the variance request, and we have it ready. It's also in our paperwork. So it's ready to be posted as well. So that was on my list. And then the other one I saw that I wanted to ask about, there are two more. One is the request to be on the agenda, which is just a little form saying it. Do we get those very often? Because most of the time I think we just get an email. So.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Answer what you think.
No, we don't often get the formalized request. And to be honest, we've been pretty loose with that. So if it's a request that we can honor via email, we tend to. But.
Yeah, I personally think it's just fine for someone to email and say, please put me on for this reason. And if someone sends the form, that's also good. So I just wanted to point it out that it is on the website forms. The other one, the one I saw that is in our code goes to something that I think Luann mentioned a couple of weeks ago in our email chain, and that was a map or text amendment request. So in other words, people are supposed to request we want to change the zoning, or not. It could be zoning, it could be the map, it could be just the text, and they're asking for a change. Does that need a form, and do we have it? And I'm thinking not, that we do need one, and we don't have it, is what I guess I'm thinking. And then the only other thing I noted was the town ones, as Amanda pointed out, and that was that those are their business license, STR license, and nuisance forms or whatever, those would be the town council. So I agree with Amanda, but those are the couple that I found.
I was going to suggest, what if we make a zoning code request form, and in it you would check a box that says change the zone of the parcel, request a map change, or request a text amendment. So it's like one form for three purposes.
I like that. I think that's great. Do you want me to do a draft one like I did for the others and bring it to the next meeting? Or Amanda, do you have one in mind you want to go to?
I mean, I assume there's standard forms we could pull from it. with. But if you
Yeah.
want to do that, that'd be great.
Okay, let me just do the map text or zone change and see if I can fake one up that we can all edit together.
Perfect. Thank you, Marcia.
Okay. And Luann, she just said that the variance ordinance isn't on the website, which is what confused me. I'm with you on that, Luann.
It has been approved though, right, Luann? Luann's like, maybe.
Do you know, Jim or Linda, for sure that that's passed you? Because I thought it was.
I could not say for sure.
Yeah, I understand, Jim. I mean, we've passed so many different things lately. Yeah.
I'll look and see.
I can look to and I can add it to the website.
I feel like it was, but
As long as it was approved, it should be added. But that you might want to.
thanks, guys. Thanks, Marcia, for your research. Yeah, if you'll do a mock-up of that form, it sounds like otherwise we're pretty good for right now. You do, like you said, you do have a variance form. Get that up there. I would like to just kind of speak to the agenda form. I'd like to keep that. If for no other reason, then it does have kind of the rule of you have to submit by Friday before the meeting. That way, if there's anything big that we need to discuss, we can decline an email request, say Wednesday, and say, sorry, we needed this information on Friday to actually answer this. But otherwise, I think most, and a lot of things also will fit under public comment. There are a lot of the agenda requests we have received often are public comment. Okay, awesome. Great. Anything else on forms before we move on?
Just put that on the next agenda, maybe, draft form. Draft zoning form.
Well, let's jump right into our next agenda, which is things for the next meeting. So we'll review draft form. We're going to talk about roles and responsibilities moving forward. And then for planning and zoning. And then maybe something will come up from our talk with town council, but those are kind of the things I've got. Anything else? We could also do this after the meeting or after our joint meeting or through email. There's things that come up. Anything else you want to discuss at planning and zoning before we move to joint session? Awesome. Thank you guys for catching it pretty tight. Should we close this meeting and open a joint session? Is that the best thing to do?
Or is chair, you could just invite the council to join our meeting.
Hey, council, join our meeting and we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is our joint session with town council. And yes, we know that you guys are busy. Thank you for joining us for another meeting. But we basically just kind of wanted to talk about goals and priorities, since we have one of our big ones was to get these amendments to you. That's been done. We have formed another one to make sure all of our forms are correct. But then we kind of want to make sure that the things that we're working towards are in line with what town council needs or wants. So that was kind of our thought for holding a session. Is there anything that council's working on? Go ahead.
It just occurred to me because we didn't discuss this until last night, and they told us to post this. This is an open meeting that's not legal for us. So the five of us need to jump up. I didn't post this.
Oh, you didn't put it in the council.
Okay. What do you say? Marshall, she doesn't agree. What do you think? I'm muting this. I think we're okay. Marcia,
You're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My reaction is you're in a public meeting. However, what happened is notice people notice the people who follow town council just don't follow PMC.
Right.
That's where the problem is. That's
And it didn't happen until we all yeah.
I'm happy to bail out. I mean, I know I'll miss it. I know. I was so excited to be able to participate tonight.
Can we just lift this up, Sarah?
I said, well, we could maybe talk about an time. If Ann, you feel that we need to stop, then is there a time that council could reconvene with the planning?
Two members, can you correct, Mayor?
Yes. And I could bail out. Jim could bail out. Jim for Linda and Luke could, and then when we ever need to, and they can update us.
Well, I'm here. I'm here for it, so I think anybody. I think Annie, you want your feedback. That's
I
what
can stay. I just think we better with two, and then we can move forward.
Okay.
I'll see you guys later. Nice to see your faces.
Thanks, Jan.
So, do you want to stay in my spot, or do the update maker? Do you want me, do you want to sign up? We can't hear you.
I could do that to you.
Well, why don't I do that since I usually do, and then I can do that.
Okay. Thanks, and then I'm gonna see you later.
There's no there.
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, ma'am. The window.
I said, should I share this whole stuff?
Make that one bigger, please. Thank you.
So we had a meeting a couple weeks ago, kind of thinking about how we wanted to spend the rest of 2020, what we wanted to work on. But planning and zoning, one of our top goals were needed, what needs to be created. Are there any systems or procedures we're missing? These and if you're still on your so we're just going to wait until you have, and then kind of what these are the kind of things we're thinking about. We have started an island ordinance. We haven't taken it to hearing or really gone much further with it, but that is something we could pick up again. And then coordinate some working meetings just for long-term planning and sustainability. So we thought about a joint meeting with you guys. Maybe water board, maybe even having a meeting where it's Sandy, just to kind of review and go over our ordinance, most of the learning. And then general thought that we had. Great things that we decided we were working on if town council also feels that. And then some things we were thinking of. So research RVs and solutions, what other towns have done. Need more clarity on the noise ordinance. So we update existing ordinances. We've done one, and then maybe we want to look at the subdivision ordinance. Enforcement code rules. More training and communication on these aspects of our work. Beyond land acknowledgement. So this was specifically how do we make Bluff a more welcoming community to our indigenous partners and neighbors. Residential occupancy. Sorry guys, this is really the density. Is that kind of what in here? I don't remember. I think so. March is giving a thumbs up. And then planning 2.0. So we really wanted to start thinking of more long-term future planning that would involve things like trails or green spaces or any of those like housing issues. We wanted to actually start going beyond that. Thinking about some of the water issues. This is kind of some of the things that were generated in our discussions. But these are big pie in the sky type things, and we're looking for some direction, knowing that we've only got we're halfway through the year, so we only have about 6 more months in 2022. What is it that we should be focusing on? Do these fit the agenda of town council? Are there other things you guys would prefer us to look at? And then I'll start talking, and Luann and you guys can jump in with your thoughts.
I'm just looking at the list. I think forms are definitely something we need to be looking at because there are areas where suddenly something pops up and we don't have a form for it. But right offhand,
And we talked a lot about that right before you hooked onto the meeting. We went through some, so I think we're catching up.
Perfect. That's great. The idling ordinance, does that tie into the one in the general thoughts on, where is it on noise?
Yeah, so need clarity on noise ordinance. Yes and no. Amanda, we actually drafted a separate noise ordinance at one point, didn't we?
Correct. Yeah, I think the idling one. I think it's about idling of like semi trucks, and I think it might include Jake brakes, or else we might have moved Jake brakes to the noise ordinance. I can't remember.
So Anne, at one point it was a joint ordinance, and then because there was some confusion or some things that were unclear about the noise ordinance, we broke them apart. So we made it just about semis idling versus like all noise. But we have both. They could be one ordinance, they could be two. And I think the big hang up for us was enforcement. So writing an ordinance that we couldn't enforce. But I will also say public comment has repeatedly come back to the idea of a noise ordinance, especially in the kennel discussions. Amanda?
And I think one of our internal questions with the noise ordinance is the planning and zoning commission the right body to write that? I think idling makes sense because it's a land use zoning issue, but with noise we were unclear as to whether we should proceed with that, and if so, what should that look like?
That's a good question. One of the things that once we get through the lighting ordinance and I make the revisions on the voted on last night edits to zoning, we'll tackle the animal one. And I think within that animal ordinance draft, we will probably have, and I'm just going to say it like it is, a knockdown drag out over noise of dogs and kennels. It's a pretty hot topic among the 5 of us, and I don't see a consensus building on this one. So I think that's something that, we'd look at. I think the idling is a really interesting one. We have the last 2 summers, and we'll see if it happens this summer, right across the street from our house next to the Desert Rose, that has become an idling truck zone by virtue of default. And I'd really like to, I don't know much about idling ordinances. In fact, I know nothing about them. But I know we can create zones. And so that might be something where I personally would like, if it's something that falls within land use, do we need a zone that we can direct truck idling vehicles to for their nightly stay? And I know that that is one permissible use that BLM and SITLA
look at for issuing leases is a nuisance kind of thing, because they looked at it for the transfer station piece in the gravel pit. So that, that to me, Lou, what's your thinking on this?
Yeah, it seems to me like it's a planning and zoning topic, if we want to put it in a zone. And got to remember that the town is big, so we've had to send them over the years. And then the word gets out, they pass the word, because we haven't had anybody parking really, Leah sometimes, but where we would send them was out to 191, that junction, because there's big enough space there. But the town's big, so there are definitely spots, and that's sort of the obvious one. It's an intersection, and there's enough space. But it would be nice to have something on the books, and then if it's kind of scary at night, to go knock on somebody's door. Jim would do it, but I was more inclined to put a sign on the window that, hey, don't park here. You can park out at 191, because they do radio each other, and they know each other, so the word gets spread.
Well, I know that our niece carries a huge tool in her car. In her truck, should somebody knock on the window in the middle of the night, they're going to get that in the face. So I don't think you should go out there.
No, I don't. But this was, before you had cell phones and all the rest. But if we have an ordinance again, then if there's somebody that's really abusing that, then that's when we can call the sheriff's office and say, hey, we've got this ordinance in place. Could you please ask them to move down the road?
And Lou raises a good point. I've had conversations with Sheriff Torgerson, and I think there's a real question as to how much enforcement Sheriff Torgerson is going to give to civil violations. Our conversations have been basically, and you need to figure it out on your own. And if it's a danger issue, if we have availability, we'll enforce it. I think that most likely what I'd like to do, and I haven't run this by the council yet, but we have a new sheriff coming in January. And I think that would be the time to talk about enforcement, and do we need to contract for specific types of enforcement? Because now we're going to have possibly a noise ordinance, possibly something involving animals. We have idling trucks and jake braking. It's probably good to clear the communication with the sheriff's department about what will they and will they not do.
And then like you say, if you can't call somebody, then there are people like me going out and asking them, and then you don't know what you're going to get in response. So it's nice to be able to have somebody in the official range do that contact, whether it's somebody local and you send a letter, or if it's a deputy that says you're parked in somebody's yard, whatever. But so anyway, I would support that, but we can take all these ideas back and get a consensus in a meeting too.
Thanks, Luann.
I did have one other one that, unless you have more thoughts, Ann.
No, go ahead, and then I'll go back to
in the earlier part of the meeting, a variance requesting a form for changing a zone, doing a variance request, and it's the variance request. The only thing I can find in my email is a variance ordinance that Chris McEnany sent back and asked us to have planning and zoning look at. None of us could remember absolutely if we had passed it. And what I found in December was that he said that it should go back to planning and zoning and you guys should pass it back to us. So I don't know if that has happened, because you couldn't have a real clear thought. So that's something I was hoping you remembered or had something newer. But this was sent to everybody on the Bluff variance ordinance. And he said, P&Z should review this, pass it off, or Ann said that. I enclosed a draft of the variance ordinance for initial review and comment. This should be reviewed by the Planning Commission prior to coming before the council for action. Let me know if I need to make any changes or clarifications. So we all got that, council and planning and zoning, but I can't remember
We actually passed it.
Did we?
Mhm. I had another conversation with him, and he said it was our choice whether to do it or not. And because we'd had whether to send it back to P and Z or not, we could go ahead and just review it and pass it. Since we have variance in the zoning code, but we don't have the process. And so we went ahead and did it because of all of the comments from folks on the lighting part of the ordinance, the sky part, about wanting to request a variance. And so we just went ahead and did it.
Right.
It's 20224A-1. So
Okay, I remember that now with those requests. But what then what it needs to happen is it needs to get on the website because it's not there.
right, and the decision to not put it there at this point was because we didn't have a form. So we
have
we
a form.
on doing a form.
We have a form. It's
Okay.
ready to go.
Okay, so we could have Linda post it.
Perfect.
Does that answer the question?
Yep.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Yes,
I
one
knew you
thing
would
done.
remember.
Marcia, did you have some thoughts? You were raising your hand.
Yeah, I would just comment on a couple of things that we talked about, and one of them was the enforcement, which Anne, you just went straight to, which is who's going to enforce the little civil laws that we do versus the actual danger laws, and I think because of that, my other comment was, how many of these ordinances are we going to pass with no teeth? And I'm not saying right or wrong, I'm just saying, how do we do that? Because in my opinion, for us to pass things that don't happen kind of undermines the strength of the town, because then people walk around going, well, who cares? Or, well, if he got away with it, so will I. Any of those things. So I'm a little hesitant to dive into these things and pass them and then not have a plan for the enforcement. And I think we've talked about that a couple of times, and it's just what level. If we have a town manager, for example, will that manager send out the letters saying, hi, you're not in compliance, could you please change this? I mean, that could be one level of enforcement, even on some of the simple things. We've talked about like signs or lights or something. So I think one of the things we're doing is getting a little ahead of ourselves in terms of, we have a lot of words that say things and then we don't make them happen. And then lastly has anyone noticed that the Jake brake signs are gone? Do we no longer have those signs about air brakes are not allowed? And I just realized I haven't seen them for a long time. So, because UDOT had put up, don't use your Jake brakes in town. Just a comment. But that's just my thought. And I want to also say to be careful that kind of what Sarah had mentioned, that we don't want to write what the town's ordinances should be. We want to write the zoning ordinances. So we have to be careful of the definitions there too.
So originally when, we had so much startup, and I think I've mentioned that before, that you all helped a bunch by drafting these ordinances, and then that saved us a ton of work. And so it was kind of a joint working session. And I remember, I think it was Chris McEnany that said, well, if they're willing, they can certainly do that. And if they're, willing and able. And then on the explanation he's given to us is that with the enforcement, that we do have enforcement because you send the letter, you send it from the town. If they don't cooperate, you give them, like Ann had in one of the things that I think I did not mention, that there was an amount of time you had at least 30 days, but no longer than 120 we added, so that it doesn't go forever. But you have that initial thing from the town, but then you also have the attorney. So when somebody gets a letter from an attorney, they're more apt to cooperate. So that's the idea. And it's every law in the land, there are going to be people that try to get around it. But this gives you the general sense of the town. If I live here, this is what happens. This is what I'm supposed to do. It's an awareness that, hey, you know, we have this light ordinance. You're supposed to have lower lights. You're supposed to have them downturned. And they're like, oh, I didn't know. And it just sort of gives you something to fall back on as a kind of a guide to Bluff. This is what we believe in. It sort of backs up our general plan. Is my opinion of the enforcement. Is you're not going to have 100% cooperation anywhere on any law you put out to anybody.
Has the town sent any letters?
Not at this point, because there's nothing that I'm aware of that needs a letter, except for one possible issue, which I've talked to Chris about. So if you're aware of something that I'm not aware of, that's not on my radar, let me know.
Well,
I think you sent out a couple too, just asking about building plans when things looked like they were going to be more construction than maybe we were aware of. And, you know, there have been a couple like that, but there haven't been any problems to address.
well, just a simple example, just not even naming names, there are sign code violations.
But those are, this ordinance, the sign ordinance, is grandfathered in, unlike the lighting ordinance. The lighting ordinance says that you've got to bring everything to compliance within these couple of years. But other ordinances.
No, I'm talking about current sign violations.
Correct. I'm in contact with Chris on those.
Okay, but the other ones.
That's fine. That's a good example. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
We needed to wait 20 days before anything could happen, before a letter could go to say that there's a violation. So
but the other flags waving in town at the other end?
At the other end, those flags, I had to wait until I got a response from the owner to verify whether my recollection was correct, that they went up after our sign ordinance, which they did. I also want to be completely transparent that the town was in violation on two things that I had to have removed. We still had the mask mandate signs up, and while they were temporary and permissible during COVID, once the governor and the legislature X'd us on any mandating, they should have come down. They were not on my radar. I had those removed last week. So yes, Marcia, there is. And I agree with Lou, there is some level of enforcement, but we absolutely need to have a policy on how we're going to enforce it. And when I get through the 2023 tentative budget this week, I should know if we have anything available to contract and hire somebody to do. We do have a town manager that an offer's been extended to and accepted, and we're working on writing the contract right now. That is one of the first, well, it's probably the third duty job that I'm turning over, is to begin the conversation with how do we do enforcement? What's the policy for that? I'm not sending multiple letters. Everybody else on the council might want more than one. My thought is you get one, then you get one from the attorney, and then you move to the civil infraction piece of it and start charging the monetary fee that's in the So yeah, we're working on enforcement, but it's going to be difficult.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Just a quick note. I think Luann, I can't remember. I think it was Luann asked about the Jake break signs, or Marcia. Sorry. But I think what may have happened, maybe Ann knows better, but I was reading the Utah regs on Jake breaks, and basically you have to have an ordinance outlawing Jake or prohibiting Jake breaks for them to have a sign. So they might have taken down the signs because we didn't have an ordinance.
I think you're
fascinating.
I think you're right. When they came through and they did the work going up the canyon, and then a little bit of work out to the west, some signs got moved and some signs got changed. And I made a note to call Jared Beard and see what we need to do about that, because those Jake breaks, you can hear them starting up at Sand Island and coming on in. I do have one question. I see we're getting close to the time. So what is the issue? I think it's a good idea to meet with Chris, and I'm sure the council will support that. I'm not sure what the water board issue is.
And I believe that was my comment. And I think what I talked about was not an issue at all, but an information session of how are water hookups going? How is the water availability? How far out? In conjunction with the idea that someone is going to bring us a subdivision, proposal, or someone is going, and just even maybe just a presentation of a few minutes of where we stand in water. I just remember I would talk to Marks Powell, even just at the library sometimes, and just go, hey, what's going on? And you go, hey, we have good water here and bad water, just an update that tells the planning and zoning that we're okay telling people to build their houses and stuff. So it was not an issue at all. And if you'd prefer that we sort of keep our distance, then that's okay too.
Yeah, I think the more information that people can get about water is a really good idea. I really appreciate it if you could get the water board to do an informational thing. I think that would be great. And I don't know, I'm assuming, Lou, you think the same thing.
I do. I think that explanation is really good. And on the reverse side, they should want to know how many houses you're approving, what you've approved to go in. It should definitely be a joint effort.
Thank you. I was hoping that that's what it was, but I wanted to just be sure we were on the same page. And always feel free to just send an email to me saying that you'd like to contact Chris to have him jump into something or do something. I think we all would prefer that. If anything, we overuse to an extent than underuse and find ourselves in a problem or a question that we guessed at. So, certainly have your meeting with them. That's great.
Thanks, Anne. So we have about 3 minutes left to respect everybody's time. Other thoughts from town council, or sounds like you guys feel comfortable with our top 3 goals. Is there anything else that town council is looking to do or needs support from planning and zoning for?
I can't think of anything. You're doing a great job. It's really, a lot of hard work, and you do a lot of research. I appreciate it. So nothing comes to mind. I know with bringing on the town manager, what I would like to do is once this person signs the contract and is approved by the council, which I'm hoping will be Tuesday, that we can all then do a joint meeting so that I know how to best utilize the manager to interface with planning and zoning.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important.
And then, Sarah, you had the last meeting, you had some sign ordinance requests. Could you clarify that for Anne? Because I don't know if we clarified that through the zoning part, or if there was something more that you wanted to look at.
No, that's a good question. Thanks, Luann. So, Anne, we reviewed I can't remember, Scenic Utah primer. I'm trying to think of the words they used. The Scenic Utah primer that really dealt with sign ordinances, specifically with digital billboards. So we went through it, and Marcia did a great job reviewing our sign code and comparing to like the suggestions. We have a lot of that in place, and town or planning and zoning kind of settled on. I don't think there's a ton we need to change at the moment. There are a few things we wrote down for clarification. So for example, signs have, we don't have anything that's specific. We say the dimensions of the sign, but we don't say the height of the sign. We also isn't clear if signs have to meet setbacks or not. So there's a couple of things that we thought about that we could change, but we aren't prioritizing this unless you would like. Bye, Marcia. Thank you. Unless town council wants us to prioritize it.
From my view, I would prefer that you not prioritize it until the legislature gets in there again and does a hard dig into the billboards. I think that they're going to make some statewide legislative changes, or they certainly worked at this last legislative session, and I don't want you to put a lot of energy into it and then find out that they just took local control away on all signs and whatever. That's just kind of my take. Lou, what's your thought?
I don't have an opinion really, so I just want
and I will
input.
Yeah, thank you, Luann, for bringing this up. And just so you know, when we went through it, I mean, a lot of this we've already thought through as a town, where some of these other towns have been caught off guard. So we do have like provisions for how signs are lit, also for whether or not they can be like flashing information, where they can be located. So we've written an ordinance that covers a lot of the suggestions. You're right. If they change the legislation, then that may not matter. But I think we have stronger sign ordinance than a lot of communities did before they started dealing with some of these new digital signs.
Yeah, I think if something pops up and you see that there's a need to do an amendment, that certainly can happen. But I wouldn't spend, like you're saying, I wouldn't spend a lot of energy revamping the whole thing and then finding out in October that it was a waste of your time. I mean, not a waste. Nothing's a waste, but you know what I mean. Not the best use of your time.
Yeah, gotcha. Thanks, Luann, for bringing that up. Thanks, Anne, for your feedback. Anything else you want to talk about before we go our separate ways?
Are you clear on what? Are you fine with those three and to get you going a while?
Yeah, I think this will at least get us moving for the next couple of meetings, and then we can always start looking at arranging some of these joint sessions, which would be also a good use of time. So.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Lou. Amanda, were there other thoughts, things that we needed or we should clarify before we?
No, but as always, these joint sessions are very helpful for us to get clear direction and ideas. We really appreciate it.
Move to adjourn.
Any further discussion? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Okay.
Thank you all.
Yeah, motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned at 7:03 p.m. Thank you guys for joining us.
Good night, everybody.
Thank
Good night.
you.